think it's when I moved into my chief of staff role when I was in banking. I really had my entire life I'd been very interested in personal development and how we can learn and grow. And it was an experience where everything just seemed to click, and I felt that the stars had aligned, and I was really performing in a way that I was very pleased with, and I felt that it just reminded me that it's also about finding an environment which is the right fit for you so you can be set up for success. So I've heard something interesting that design and people who are in the more design related fields will actually continue to be in huge demand, if not more now, because there are certain things, at least today, that AI can do and AI can't do. And it's about knowing where that is and then having the human competence to complement that.
In true Oconee Tech Talk style, we like to go back to the beginning. So can you share some more about your journey and how you transitioned from investment banking to becoming a COO?
I've always been involved in finance. So at university, I studied finance in my undergrad. When I graduated, I did equity sales. And then when I moved to the UK to do an MBA at London Business School, I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do, but afterwards found myself working in investment banking in finance, but albeit at a different part. But it was really, I realized that what I loved the most was kind of the intersection between finance operations and technology, and that's always been the kind of thread where I've seen my career. So it's been an evolution. I don't think you wake up one day and know exactly what you want to do, even though I think sometimes we feel a bit of anxiety that we don't have that clear thread. But I think it was Steve Jobs who said, you connect the dots by looking backwards. And I would say that's definitely held true for me.
And you are a strategic advisor as well.
Yes.
What does that kind of entail?
It entails working with startups and really helping them think through, much in the same way I do as a COO, what are your biggest strategic topics? Where do you need help? Helping them problem solve. Oftentimes that can range from topics such as fundraising. It's a very nerve-wracking time. How do you position your business in the best possible light? How do you think through those key strategic hires? How do you really position yourself for success? Because it's being able to take that broader sort of bird's eye view of how your business looks in context of its competitors. And that can be more difficult to do when you're in the reeds. So it's work that I really enjoy, and I've gotten to work with some great startups, and it's just been, it's something that I find is very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm. And being a woman in leadership as well, have you faced many challenges, particularly in industries that are sort of very male-dominated?
I think it's always a challenge to find your voice when you don't look and sound like everybody else in the room. I think that's always, and that can be, you can be diverse in a number of kind of categories. There's social mobility, there is race, there is gender. There's a number of ways in which it can cut. But for me, it's definitely been, there's been a lot of code switching which has had to happen at times. I think being from South Africa, which is a multicultural country, and there's been a lot of sort of race and gender, and a number of these topics have been quite front and center my whole life, that I'm somewhat comfortable talking about these things. And I think it's helped me adapt. This is my fourth continent in which I've lived on, so I'm used to kind of moving around. But it's definitely something where you have to go in with a sense of curiosity and wanting to focus on learning about the room in which you're in, versus focusing on being different, which it's easy to do when you are quote unquote different.
Mm-hmm. And you just mentioned this is the fourth continent you've lived on. What's the difference like coming from South Africa to being in Dubai?
It's actually feels some level of familiarity. I mean, this sounds silly, but the sun is obviously plentiful here, and that's something which I grew up a lot around. It's mostly sunny. I would say there's also there is a South African diaspora here, so I'm able to go to a number of restaurants which I really like and eat things which because they've set up kind of shop here, as it were, I'm able to eat. So I'm able to access things that make me feel closer to home. But it's funny, I lived in London for 10 years. You know, what becomes home it becomes quite relative.
Yeah.
And home for me now feels like in many different places that I've lived. So it's an interesting one.
When it comes to your career journey and the progression and the path that you've been on, what advice would you give to women who are aspiring to fill those leadership roles?
The biggest thing that I have tried to incorporate into the way I work is really being curious, because focusing on the process of learning and being sort of inquisitive about how things can be versus it has to be like this. You know, it's kind of this all or nothing pursuit of the way we work. I would really say that I've noticed, and I can say this because I've managed large groups of people. I found there was oftentimes a perfectionist mindset which was more common amongst women, and I think that can be challenging because you don't really leave yourself room to grow, and you may hold yourself back from pursuing more challenging work or things where you don't think you're going to be perfect. So I think for me I try think more about have I learned and what could I do differently versus have I been perfect.
Yeah. And when it comes to mentorship as well, how has that helped you in your journey?
I've been really lucky to have a wonderful network of people, both men and women, who've been really supportive in my journey. And there's obviously the sponsorship piece where they'll actively put your name down, in rooms that you're not in for positions that they think that you may be a good fit for. So I've been really lucky. They've also it's the person you can ask questions and know that they really have your best interest at heart. And I would encourage everyone, it's a tricky topic because how do you seek out a mentor? I would say that those relationships develop and evolve, and they've typically been more natural for me, people that I've worked with, bosses, and maybe I've moved on, but they've stayed as a board of advisors informally. But I would encourage people to think of mentors both on an upward level, but also horizontally. Maybe there's people that you know in your network who have particular skills or experiences that you may want to develop. And I would absolutely encourage people to seek those out too.
And what lessons have you learned from working across different countries and cultures?
That you need to be curious and you need to adopt a learning mindset and really ask questions, learn, be curious, recognize that you have a lot to add, because diversity is always a net positive in my view, but you don't need to know all the answers, and don't assume, ask, engage. I think there probably people are curious to learn what makes you different as much as you're curious to learn about them.
And looking at your career journey so far, what's been a standout moment for you where you've really felt that personal breakthrough?
I think it's when I moved into my chief of staff role when I was in banking. I really had my entire life I'd been very interested in personal development and how we can learn and grow. And it was an experience where everything just seemed to click, and I felt that the stars had aligned, and I was really performing in a way that I was very pleased with, and I felt that it just reminded me that, you know, it's also about finding an environment which is the right fit for you so you can be set up for success. So I think it was, for me, really that pivot was a defining moment for me.
Mm-hmm. And fast forwarding to your current role, what does a day look like for you, or is no day the same?
I would say the COO role is really defined by the fact that no day is the same.
Mm-hmm.
So I can be dealing with the minutiae of trying, especially in a scale up, dealing with flights, trying to work with founders, but then thinking about very big strategic topics like fundraising or a new strategic shift of the business, really trying to add value and add leverage. Mm-hmm. So I would say it's really about being quite flexible and open to the fact that it changes a lot. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, that's one of the things I like. I'm somebody who very much appreciates that diversity of experience, so it works for me.
Mm-hmm. And of course, when you're talking about business strategy in simple terms, there's always the two angles of, you know, the data-driven decisions and then the people-focused decisions. How do you balance that kind of strategy?
I think data is really important, and I think so are people, and I think you can't make a decision without considering the other side of things, because there's always nuance, there's always context, and if you only look at one without looking at the other, you're not seeing the full picture. So I definitely make decisions always having the data. I think it's important. Data helps you see trends. It also takes out some of your bias, because numbers in general, of course there's always interpretation, but I feel that they're a good indication of where things are today. But then you need to consider what's going on and who are the right people. And have you considered, I'm making something up, but if a particular unit is not performing as well, and that's evidenced by the numbers, what could be something that's underlying that, and make sure that that's part of your strategic decision making. I think you really want to be considered, and that's particularly as you get more senior, because your role impacts people that you may not always understand what's going on, so you need to be thoughtful in the way you execute.
Absolutely. And you know, we've kind of touched on the fact you've worked and lived across continents, and your work has obviously had a particular interest in the Middle East as well, but how has this kind of global exposure shaped your approach to business and leadership?
I think it's really about being, for me it's important to be humble. I think we can, as a tendency, learn how to do it right in one context, and then assume that way is going to work always and in every context, and the reality is it doesn't. I know, Francesca, you and your team have been in Dubai, and we were discussing before the podcast started just about that it's different. And I think for me, you know, even in Anglo-Saxon cultures, I spent time in New York and some time in the US, and that was different. It was more direct oftentimes than what I was used to, having worked in London, which was very different to working in Johannesburg. So I just think it's important that even if things may look the same, they aren't necessarily the same. And I think if you can just be curious and open-minded and respectful, I think that probably you can get a lot done. I mean, someone said to me once, and I don't think this is a surprise, people do business with people. And you know, you can have the best product in the world and the most fantastic service offering, but if you aren't making that dot that ultimately the trust is important, and the dynamic between two individuals is equally important, I think there can be lost opportunity there.
Yeah. And I know you touched on, you know, being curious is a key skill to have, but if you could go back and tell yourself, you know, one piece of advice that you know now, what would it be?
I think striving to it's a difficult one, but I would say, at the risk of repeating myself, it would be to adopt that curious mindset early on. I think often, and I know your listeners are university students and tech enthusiasts, we don't always know the answers. Things are evolving. Sometimes it may feel at the end of the world that you haven't got that internship or those particular marks at uni, but you don't really know how things are going to pan out for you. And not seeing things as closed doors or open doors, but being kind of curious of, I'm evaluating, I'm exploring, and just having more of an open mindset with things. If for me, it would really be back to my 21-year-old self. Think about a growth mindset. Think about what you can learn, and know that if you work hard, you will be able to develop.
And speaking of the way not only people develop, tech is constantly developing and innovating, but when it comes to trends in tech, finance, leadership, what excites you the most right now, and how do you see things evolving over the next few years?
I would say on a deeply personal level, I would imagine I'm not alone when I say that artificial intelligence is hugely exciting, and I've just seen how much of an enabler it is, using LLMs to be able to almost talk to, as a strange way. Being in a senior role, sometimes you don't necessarily have the luxury, as you become more senior, of being able to ask somebody questions. And believe it or not, I now actually start my day. Sometimes I'll have a question and I'll go into ChatGPT and I'll ask it, please do this. So I think this concept of that AI is going to take our jobs is obviously one that it comes up quite a bit. But for me, it's less about AI taking our jobs and more those of us whose jobs will be quote unquote taken away are more the ones who are not using AI. I think AI is a huge enabler. Some things that used to take me maybe 2 days of work, I can get done in 2 hours. It's just fascinating how much you can do. And for me, I'm just excited to see how these tools continue to evolve, particularly in the concept of sort of personal development, learning, engagement. I just think there's more and more that can be done, and I think the ability to pick up skills very quickly is going to have massive implications in the way that we learn and how our careers evolve.
Absolutely. We'll come back to AI as well shortly, but what's next for you in your career? Are there any specific goals or projects you're excited about?
I guess I will take my own advice about being curious. I'm working with droppGroup at the moment, which is a leading AI and blockchain Web3 business, and really enjoying that journey and learning so much about disruptive technology, which I think is a gift if you can do that during your workday. Learn as well as contribute. I think it will be continuing to just work with innovative companies and help them on their journey. I think that would really be kind of a huge sense of interest for me. I think I'm in the stage of that moving into a stage of my career where maybe I'm more in the reaping all the rewards of working hard and being able to use some of that insight and expertise. So I'm looking forward to put all of this learning to use.
I love that. And we come on to the trending in tech round, and we come back to AI and the way things are evolving, but you kind of touched on that fear of, people do seem to be a little scared at times that it is going to take jobs and replace people. We've had quite a lot of conversations about how actually it's about the people working hand in hand with the technology and kind of forming a partnership. But one industry where we've seen a lot happening with AI specifically is the entertainment industry. So things like film, photography, music, replicating, people's voices and faces. Do you think, regardless of how AI kind of evolves, there's still always going to be that space and need for human touch as well?
So I've heard something interesting that, design and, people who are in the more design related fields will actually continue to be in huge demand, if not more now, because there are certain things, at least today, that AI can do and AI can't do. And it's about knowing where that is and then having the human competence to complement that. So I don't see it as a kind of, in support of that view, that it's going to be taking our jobs, or I think it has the ability to disrupt certain industries, but I think there will still need to be a level of human intervention, and particularly in the concepts of creativity, because that, it's helpful to brainstorm with ChatGPT or Claude, but it's absolutely not going to replace humans when it comes to design and the creativity piece.
I think, if anything, as well, we've kind of said this before. Reflecting back to school days, no one ever sort of said, "I can't wait to be a social media manager," because it wasn't a thing.
Exactly.
So I suppose with the way AI is evolving, it will bring new job opportunities as well, rather than take them.
Exactly.
Yeah. With things like AI now, and like you said, the language learning models, there's AI avatars and things like that. What sort of piece of AI are you most excited about, or what are you really enjoying using?
I think for me, I'm enjoying as I said, the LLM piece. I find that, and even using them against one another, so I can kind of ask one questions, put it into the response of the other one, and then kind of see what they say. So I feel, for me, this is just adding a lot of value because I'm able to think through quite complicated work streams that probably would be difficult to do alone, but now I'm able to, because I leverage artificial intelligence. So I would say that for me is the most interesting. I think as a COO, what's very interesting is we haven't really seen, there's this whole piece, particularly in the UK, around productivity. One of the startups that I'm working with is looking to address that challenge, particularly within companies. So in engineering focused companies, how do you improve the productivity? How do you align people against the strategic objectives, particularly in large distributed teams? So I think an AI that will be able to do that and give actionable insights, for me, I think that's going to be quite powerful, and probably unlocks quite a bit of productivity.
And finally, we come on to the this or that round, where we find out your favourite picks. So, Candice, iPhone or Samsung?
My husband is very much a Samsung person, but I am an iPhone. I haven't managed.
And Spotify or Apple?
I like Spotify. I just find it easy to use.
And Netflix or cinema?
I would love to say cinema, but Netflix does win just because it's easy.
We were saying the other day, actually, some people say, love to go to the cinema and then spend £30 on a drink and popcorn, kind of removes, even though it's nostalgic, not sure if I prefer it. Laptops or tablets?
Oh, definitely laptop.
I
like being able to type.
And ChatGPT or virtual reality?
For me, ChatGPT, because I was never a gamer. I think I stopped at Super Mario, so gaming's never been my thing. I think but ChatGPT, yes, absolutely. I probably spend 2 hours on it every day. So.
And video calls or voice notes?
Video calls. I'm not a voice note person.
I feel like I'm getting there with voice notes, but then, there's that element of why not just hop on the phone?
Exactly. Then you're kind of spending. But I know some people really like them, and here they're quite popular, so I'm having to adjust.
And finally, Candice, if you could bring back one original piece of tech that's either evolved in its format or it no longer exists, what would it be and why?
That's a good question. It's a very good question. What did I love? I think I quite liked the Walkman. I mean, I know that it exists, but there was something quite fun about having your Walkman and doing your things, you know?
Rummaging through your cassettes or CDs.
Yes, so I remember my cassettes, and I would be very sad because invariably the tape recorder would eat them. For me, that's it.
Oh, it's been a real joy to chat with you today, Candice. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Francesca.